Hello, YouTube. The fight between a man and a bear for life and death is a terrifying sight. In Russia, a duel with a bear was a favorite national pastime. Arranging cruel entertainment, the Russian tsars or kings confused foreign ambassadors. According to scientists, some of the ancient peoples of Eurasia who lived in a tribal system, for them the bear was considered to be a totemic animal. The natural fear of the formidable predator resulted in the veneration of his might. Some archaic Russian folktales endow the bear with the role of the master of the forest, which later was passed to Baba Yaga. She was a mythological creature and one that most likely resembles modern depictions of aliens and their little understood conduct on our planet. And I mentioned it in my other videos. And this video is not about Baba Yaga, but I wanted to let you know. Well, participants of the male hunting and military unions conducted initiation ceremonies to symbolically adopt the power of the brown giant of the forest. Probably they put on bear skins and masks and arranged dances. Psychological identification with a bear was facilitated by the fact that the shaggy beast resembled a human in body structure, especially when it stood on its hind legs. The ritual rebirth of initiates into wolves or dogs, bears in ancient times was characteristics of many Indo-European people, in particular the Proto-Slavs or ancient Slavs, the Balts, the Germans, the Celts, and the Indo-Iranians. The young daredevils could show some bearish habits in duels. Bestial rage in the Middle Ages was demonstrated by possessed Scandinavian berserkers who dressed in bearskins and bet their shields, as the skald Thorbjorn Hornklovi wrote in the 9th century, and as Snorri Sturluson noted, berserkers were as strong as bears. I have a video about the Scandinavian berserkers. I invite you to watch it because I pay attention to the history of North Russia and the territories around it. It's a very complicated, very interesting history, and we'll get back to some of the concealed pages of that history in the future. In East Slavic folklore, the hero bear, for example, Ivashko, the bear's ear, is known. He was the son of a bear and a woman. He partially retains the bearish appearance, human being to the waist and a bear from the waist. The hero is so strong that in many accounts of the story, he kills his father, the bear. And the bear killed his son, and the bear's son pulled out an oak tree and killed the bear and ran away with his mother. Narrates the fairy tale Bear's Son, recorded in the 19th century in the Samara region by Dmitry Sadovnikov. According to philologists, Ivashko is extremely close to the hero of the myth and not the later fairy tale, and the fight with the bear was not at all a fabulous event for the ancient people. Such clashes periodically occurred during the hunt, and the man who managed to get out of the fight alive, of course, enjoyed special honor among his fellow tribesmen. All this leads to the hypothesis of the possible existence of ritual duels with bears among Russia's modern Russian ancestors, which only the bravest and the strongest men decided to engage in these ritual duels. However, there is no direct evidence of this. With the development of agriculture, and especially after the adoption of Christianity by the Slavs, the ancient bear rites degenerated, so to say, taking other forms. The closest analog of this phenomenon is the ritual killing of a bull in the ancient Mediterranean, which over the centuries transformed into the Spanish bullfight. One of the main remnants of paganism in Russia remained the so-called buffoonish amusements, the skamarokhs, or buffoons, and their bears walked through the towns and villages, taking with them, just leading the bears, trained bears. A skamarokh was a medieval East Slavic entertainer, so to say, or harlequin, or actor, who could also sing, dance, play musical instruments, and compose for oral, musical, and dramatic performances. It is assumed that initially the bear games had the forms of martial arts and were an integral part of festive games. According to Soviet historian Anatoly Belkin in the book The Russian Skamarokhs, sometimes the skamarokhs sat on bears and allowed the public to ride them, but the sources do not describe a direct struggle between a man and a bear, even a made-up one, a feigned one, so to say. Belkin, however, notes that during the performance, the single combat was played out by the leader and was of a joking nature, or jocular nature. Quite another thing was the bear fun at the royal court. In ancient times, apparently, the prince himself or members of his military squad did not disdain to show hunting talent in the forest. According to legend, the city of Yaroslavl was found that on the place where Yaroslav the Wise single-handedly killed a bear with an axe. The scene of a horse hunting bear when the rider strikes the beast with a spear is present on the fresco of the St. Sophia's Cathedral in Kiev, dating from the 11th century. It is curious that the scene, the struggle of the masked ones, is depicted nearby, representing another echo of ritual duels. A fighter in an animal mask points a pitchfork at a warrior armed with an axe and a shield. The Moscow sovereigns regularly entertained themselves on holidays with the so-called palace fun, bear fighting, along with bear baiting when the animals were attacked by dogs. Wild bears were caught for the royal court in the forest, and occasionally even polar bears were imported from the north. Rogatina is a Slavic heavy spear for hand-to-hand combat or for hunting a large animal. It is distinguished by a large, wide, double-edged tip. The fighters who went out to fight were armed with rogatina or wooden pitchforks. The Englishman Giles Fletcher, who visited Moscow under Tsar Fyodor Ivanovich, wrote that in order to successfully confront the bear, it was necessary to have time to put a rogatina into the beast's chest while it was sleeping, while it was stepping on a man with a roar, standing on its hind legs. Imagine the scene. Bending the second end of the rogatina to the leg, the participant of the fight overturned the clubfoot. Having won, the fighter usually got drunk in the royal cellar. The winners were not left without a reward. The sovereign favored them with valuable foreign fabrics and that could be sold profitably. By the way, the club food that's a nickname for bears in Russian. Sometimes a bear tore a person's clothes, and documents report about some unsuccessful fighters that a bear ate his left hand, ate him by the head and broke his teeth. In this case, the reward was in the nature of compensation. Under Russian king or Tsar Ivan the Terrible, according to the testimony of foreigners, unprepared, unarmed people were sometimes released against bears. This was a form of sophisticated mockery of them, but a very dangerous fun. But the custom of such fights is much older. The scene of an unarmed man's confrontation with a bear, for example, is depicted on the seal of Prince Vasily Alexandrovich of Novgorod from the 13th century. Cruel fun flourished at the courts of tsars Mikhail Fedorovich and Alexei Mikhailovich. Later, in the 18th century, bears were more often pitted against each other and with other animals. The organizers were, of course, not only the Tsars of Russia. By the way, on January 1st, 1867, Russia banned driving bears for the amusement of the people, leading them through the towns. Before that, on weekends, enterprising people often staged performances with learned bears for the amusement of the public. After the ban, animals were allowed to be kept only in circuses. Now, the Russian phrase "lead by the nose," according to one account, originated from the history with the bears. The animal was driven around the villages using a strong chain, which was attached with a ring to the nose lobe. The last duels of a man and a bear in Russia were held presumably at the beginning of the 19th century. But I have heard of the much later cases in Siberia. And before we judge people for their strange fun and unusual conduct with the animals, I can tell you stories about execution of peacocks in Switzerland, which was definitely not Russia. So, I think it's a global phenomenon how human beings have treated animals. And it's sad, but this is part of history, and I wanted to let you know. Once in a while, I bring interesting tales of the East European and Russian customs and sometimes very strange people who live there, and of people who are brave and interesting. So let the world know about customs of people of Eurasia. I want to thank you for your attention to my work. If you can support me, please do so. You'll find how to do it in the description of this video. And please tell others about my channel.